Oh, we've got people. All right. Good morning, everybody. It is, I think it's still 10 o'clock. Oh, no, we're past 10 now. But anyway, my name's Linda Driver, and I'm a San Joaquin County Master Food Preserver. And this morning, Colleen Young and Barbara Matthijs and I are going to bring you some citrus recipes because we all need a little sunshine today. I don't know where you are, but in zip code 95207, I'm looking at gray fog out the backyard. So it's nice to have, that's one of the things that citrus does for you. It brings you a little sunshine. It's stored up all that sunshine all over the summer, and we get to enjoy it in the winter. So anyway, this morning we have two recipes we're going to talk about, but before we go to the recipes, I'm going to spend a couple of minutes talking about the two kinds of processing that you can use with these recipes, because I'm not sure how many people are brand new to canning at all, and you may be just wanting to explore, and so there's some differences. I would imagine most everybody has seen one of these. This is the standard canning kettle, and it is a very big thing, and it is really heavy when it's full of water. And in it, there's a lid, and inside the canner kettle, there is a rack like this that you set your jars on. And the rack the purpose of the rack is to fix it so that your jar sits on top of this and not on the bottom of the pan. And that allows the water that's in the canner kettle to circulate all around the jar, because you want water underneath the jar and on the sides of the jar and above the jar when you are processing. And so you want that rack in there. Now, you don't have to buy one of these. They are relatively inexpensive. I have seen them you can pick them up at yard sales sometimes for very little money. And brand new, I've seen them for as little as 20 bucks. And so they're not an expensive thing. But if you don't want to spend any money and you want to find out if you like canning things, there are ways around it. If you have any pan that is deep enough that you can put the size jar you want to process in it and have water on top of it, you're good. And you can even make your own rack. You can either use like a cake rack, a little round cake rack, the cake cooling rack that you might have in your kitchen. You can put that in the bottom of your pan. Or you can, if you have extra of the rings that go around your jars, you can tie these together with wire ties, and you can put this in the bottom of your pan and set your jars on top of it. And you can make this to fit any size pan you have. And I also found, this is really cool. I found this at, I think I found it Walmart, Target, one of those places, but it's a silicone rack, and it has a little clip so that you can keep it so it stays open, and then it folds flat, but that can go in the bottom of a pan, and you can set your jars on top of it, and it doesn't take up very much space. And you can use a sauce pot if you're doing small jars, if you're making jam or jelly. A couple of the tools that you use for these things, and my compatriots will probably talk about that, but having a jar lifter is a very handy thing to do, because it means that you can lift the jars without getting your fingers burnt. And this is a thing that I'm sure that both of them will demonstrate, but it's a headspace measure, which is a really handy tool to have. And then, what did I do with it? Oh, there it is. Often canning kits come with a funnel that will fit on the top of the jar and makes it easier to fill. I generally don't use one, but a lot of people swear by them. So those are the things. Now, if you're using a water bath canner, you need to put enough water in this canner to cover up the top of the jars by at least an inch. That's going to take a lot of water, and it's going to be really heavy when you're doing it. And so that's a consideration. I have, and I wasn't sure about it when I bought it, but I have turned into a person who is a real fan of a steam canner. And finding enough room for all this stuff in my office is fun. A steam canner has a bottom that is much shallower, and it has a rack that fits inside it, and you put only as much water as it takes to come up to the bottom of the rack that you put the jars on. And then once you have the jars in this, you put the lid on, and the steam canner comes with a lid that has a gauge on the top. And when the marker gets into the green zone for your elevation, that's when you start counting your time. And once you start counting your time, you count your time on this when it gets into the green zone, and you see a steady stream of steam coming out of the vent hole in the back. Face it away from you so it doesn't come up in your face. Or if you're using the water bath canner, your time starts counting when you have a full boil over your jars. The processing time is the same for both things. So if it says process for 10 minutes, it's 10 minutes in this or 10 minutes in that, doesn't matter. And then the biggest difference probably between the two for the way you use them is when you are done processing, you turn off the heat, both of them, you turn off the heat. And if you're using a steam canner, you leave the lid on and wait 5 minutes before you take the lid off. If you're using a water bath canner, you turn the heat off and you take the lid off immediately. Reason for that is the thing that is producing the heat in this thing is steam. If you take the lid off, you go immediately from 212 degrees, which is the temperature of the steam, to whatever your room temperature is. That's a real shock for your jars, and we're trying not to shock our jars at this point in time. If you take the lid, if you are using the water bath canner, even when you take the lid off of this thing, the jars are still surrounded by water, and that water is really hot. So taking the lid off is not going to, you're not going to have that shock. And the waiting 5 minutes is so that everything has a chance to settle down, because once we have created that seal on our jars, that's something we want to keep and not mess with. So all the things we do to protect that seal is what helps keep our food stay safe in the jar until we get ready to use it. So I think that's a really brief, basic, the difference between those two kinds of things. But the two recipes we're talking about today both use either steam canning or water bath canning as the way you are going to process things. Now, let's see, Barbara, I think you were going first, right? You are muted still, Barbara. There you go.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, and in our chat, if you have questions, one of us will be answering things in the chat. We ask that people, even if you have a lot of experience, if it's a technical question, let somebody who is a master food preserver answer the question, because we take responsibility for making sure that we give answers that are science-based, and it's our responsibility when we're doing presentations to make sure we give you good, solid information. So I'm turning it over to my friend Barbara Matthijs, and she's going to talk to you about blood orange marmalade.
Okay, so when we talk about canning, we always talk about cleanliness. Sanitation is where we start by sanitizing the counters and your hands and the surfaces, the cutting boards, the knives, and everything else that you're going to be using in the kitchen, just to make sure that we all stay healthy. Okay, we're going to talk about produce today. I have blood oranges, and we want to make sure that that we don't take any of the contamination that's on the blood orange. Some of them I picked up off the ground, so I know there's bacteria on them, and eliminate those as much as we can. And of course, in the processing, we kill a lot of bacteria too. But we want to start first by washing the produce, and we wet it and scrub it a little bit. I use a new sponge on most of my vegetables, and just, you don't have to scrub it like you would a pot, but scrub the surface, rinse it with running water Don't soak it in the water, and I lay them on paper towels to get them, let them dry by themselves. Okay, so the first thing you do is get your oranges. Okay, I admit, I went to my neighbor's yard. I have permission, and I picked blood oranges. So here's the bag of blood oranges that I got from my neighbor. It used to be when I looked up marmalade recipes, you always had to do something to them and then let them sit for 24 hours and then do something else to them. So I really like the most recent ones that I have that you can process it all in one day. And this is a recipe that I'm using is from Ball, Book of Home Food Preserving 2012. And anyway, I just wanted you to see the color of the blood oranges. And of course, the most ripe ones are the darkest colored ones. Okay, so the recipe calls for 3 pounds. That's kind of hard to judge when you're going to the neighbor's yard and picking them. If you go to the grocery store, then of course you can measure out 3 pounds. So I weighed them and set aside the extra ones, and I only had 3 pounds. And I washed them under running water, and you can see, you know, the drops of water still on them. Okay, this is just a picture. Do not worry. I wanted to show you what the recipe looks like without typing it all. And there's only 2 ingredients. They're right there at the top, the citrus and the sugar. And then you add water, of course. But the process is what it's all about. So all that typing is all of the process in the boiling and peeling and boiling and all the rest of it. And we'll go through those. So my equipment's ready. I have washed the lids. They came out of a package. I washed them. I have rings that I've used over and over again. That's my funnel. I use a funnel because I'm messy. Even with a funnel, I'm messy. And that's my jar lifter. I don't know where I put my headspace measurer. I just use whatever I've got that I've marked off to 1/4 of an inch or 1/2 an inch or whatever it calls for. This recipe calls for 1/4 of an inch. So I'll show you that later on. So here are my jars. You can see they're various sizes. They're reused jars. And I always wash and inspect. Because I'm reusing them, you get chips in them, you get cracks in them, you need to look them over before you use them. Even if they come out of a new package, I have found ones in new packages that have chips. And of course, they need to be discarded. These are sitting on my steam canner, and there's water in it. And because I know this process takes a long time, they're just going to sit there until I'm ready to warm them up. And I'm going to warm them up because I'm going to put hot marmalade in them, and I don't want them breaking. And usually what will happen is they'll break right around the bottom. The bottom will just come off if you shock them. So always prepare extra so that if your recipe has more than it says it will make, you've got someplace to put it. Okay, this is the first blood orange that I cut into, and it's got great color. Some of them are lighter and some of them are a little bit darker, but that's kind of what you're going for. I cut off the top and the bottom and quartered it, and then I peeled it just like you'd peel an orange. Stuck my fingernail between the flesh of the orange and the rind and pulled it off. Some of them had blemishes on them. I discarded the ones that had blemishes on the rind. So here's the pile from those 3 pounds, 1/4, so you can see they're all different sizes. And this was a part that kind of took a long time, and I didn't really believe it was going to work, but it did. I've never used this recipe before. I've used other recipes. So when you follow this recipe, just follow the numbers. Their processes are numbered down the side, but basically you cook and drain and cook and drain, and there you go. So here they are, the first time that you boil them. It just seemed like a lot of rind to me. I couldn't believe I'm going to use all that rind, but you do, and it doesn't have to be a certain amount. I measured it just because I was curious as to how much it turned out to be, and it was two cups. But I couldn't believe it was going to be reduced the way it was. So here's the rind after it's been boiled a couple of times. The lower left-hand corner is 1/4 of an orange. It's just a slab. It's nice and pliable by now. It just lays flat. And the gunky stuff is the pith, the white stuff on the inside that I've scraped off with a spoon. You can't go much deeper than that because then you start tearing it. So you scrape it off the best you can. And when you start seeing orange, then you know you've got most of it. And then you slice it. You're supposed to slice it in long strips. Well, I don't like my marmalade in long strips because when I take a spoonful out, I don't want the part that's hanging down off of it. So I cross-cut them. So there you go. Leave them in long strips if you like it that way. That is tradition. I just have done it enough and I don't like it, so I cut them up. You could probably even cut it up in smaller pieces, but I didn't see any reason to. Okay, so then the recipe is really kind of a little humorous. You use a knife to remove all of the white membrane between the section of oranges. I did that for about 10 seconds, and then I just started squeezing it out. And it was much faster and much easier, and I'm not good with a knife, and I wasn't going to spend that time on it. So do as I say, not as I do, and follow the recipe the best you can. The idea is to get the flesh of the orange and the juice separated from the membranes that separate the sections of the orange. So that's the leftover, not much. Out of 3 pounds of oranges, that's all the insides that are left. And yeah, my fingers turned purple. Okay, so I put all of the juice and all of the flesh of the orange and 4 cups of water into a big pot, and I boiled it gently for 30 minutes. Everything got soft and smushy, and it really was that color. It's beautiful. Okay, the recipe, on the very top of the recipe, it says that you will have better results if you divide the mixture and do it in 2 batches. And because I wanted to process them all at the same time and I didn't want them to sit there, I did 2 batches. I have 2 hands, 2 spoons, and 2 burners, and that's how I did it. So you put them in 3 cups in one, 3 cups in the other, and then you add the sugar, 3 cups in one, 3 cups in the other. I found it was very difficult to maintain the boil and add the 3 cups of sugar. You have to do it very slowly because you lose the boil on it. And even though these pots are 2 different sizes, they seem to cook the same amount. The one on the right has a much bigger bottom to it, so it has more flame that touches it. They processed about the same time. So after I had done that, you boil them hard. Well, during that, you boil them hard and you're stirring constantly. And at about 12 minutes, I turned off the fire and tested for gel. So one of the ways you test for gel, and I know there are others, but this is the one I used. I took a spoonful and put it in a little bowl, and I put it in the freezer for 1 minute. And although it doesn't show really well, I thought about a pancake. If you're cooking a pancake and you touch the sides of it where it's damp, you can tell it's not done. And if you touch it and it's dry and it pushes back a little bit, then you've got your pancakes done. Well, this is kind of the same thing. I put my fingernail against the edge of the syrup, and it had an edge to it. It had a resistance. It held its shape, and then I knew it was gelling. It put it back ready to put in the jars. But if it doesn't, if it's still a lot liquid and it doesn't have that, I don't want to call it a crust. It's not, but it's an edge. Then put it back on the stove and cook it a little longer. If I were to do that, I'd probably cook it 3 or 4 more minutes and try again until it had gelled. So it's hard to take pictures of yourself putting things together, and I didn't have anybody around to take pictures. So trust me, I used the funnel and I filled the jars, and then I wiped the rims, and I also had to wipe the sides because on some of them I got a little messy. So where the screw top is going to go on, I wiped that part off so that I didn't have any sticky on that, and put them all together. So there's one that's very short there on the left. That one went in the refrigerator. It got tasted several times that day, and I don't know if there's any left in that jar. But the others are 1/4 inch down. You can see them, the ones in the back row. You can see how the 1/4 inch and everything on. And then I had, when I started stirring and adding the sugar and stirring and added the sugar, I turned on the fire underneath the jars. So they got hot, so that I was putting hot product into hot jars and wasn't shocking anything there. So I processed them for 10 minutes in this canner. And Linda told you all about the canner, that we always include the information. This particular model of canner is approved by University of California. It has that gauge on the top, and I think it's called a Victorio. Is that right? That's how I remember. If that's different, let me know. At any rate, you can see the steam hole, and here you can see it closer. You have to have steam coming out of that hole, and you have to have the gauge in the green for your altitude. And then you start counting your 10 minutes. And then when your 10 minutes are up, you turn off the fire. So turned off the fire, waited a beat or two, and used the jar lifter to lift the jars over onto a towel. You don't want to set them on the cold countertop. Again, temperature shock. So I ended up with 7 full jars and one that went in the refrigerator. And then I haven't labeled them, but they are sitting on the counter. And I put in the, they won't last a year. Usually we say, they're good for a year. They're good for longer than that, but you want to eat them up and make new next year. And there's no reason to save them. I wanted to show you, this is what the color looks like. It's beautiful. I can't see any of the little orange wedges. All I see is the pretty color of the blood orange.
Barbara?
Yes.
We're not seeing we only just see the picture of the jars sitting on the counter.
Okay. I didn't know if you could see me or not. So
no. Well,
okay.
I can't. Maybe other people can. Let me see.
Well, that's okay. When we go back to
hold it up again. You were behind the chat for me.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
How can you see it? Yeah.
Yes.
It's really
okay.
It's beautiful, and it tastes good. It's good tasting. So this you will receive all of this information, so you don't have to hurry and scurry and write it down unless you know how to take a screenshot of it. It's the information sources that we use. I especially like the National Center for Home Food Preservation. It's the 3rd one down, and that's where I get a lot of my recipes from that. So Easy to Preserve is a cookbook that we use, a canning cookbook, and I use that one too. They're just the ones that I like, that I find the fastest in the National Center for Home Food Preservation. And you can see by the URL that it's universityofgeorgia.edu. Real easy to find. And that's all I have to say.
I'm answering Barbara that yes, you could use this recipe with any citrus, right?
Yes. The only other thing I think of is regular oranges, but you could make marmalade out of any other citrus. But I do make kumquat marmalade, and usually I mix a little some orange in it. I have a mixture of kumquat and regular oranges, we really, really like that flavor of the kumquat too. So,
Yeah. And I'll make sure that my favorite marmalade is in the ones that are posted, which is the lemon ginger marmalade.
Yeah.
That's my favorite one. So.
And I didn't talk about it, but maybe you want to mention that you, about the adding the dry things like the ginger.
Oh, thank you.
which
Yes,
is vegetable. Yeah.
that's good. When we're doing one of these recipes, you'll hear all of us, everybody who's a master food preserver, our mantra is follow the recipe. And we will say that over and over and over again. But the one thing that you can change without any guilt-ridden whatever in things is you can add dried spices. So if it's a cinnamon stick or a clove or anything like that, you can add that to whatever you're doing, and it will not make a difference it'll make a difference in flavor, but it does not make a difference in the safety of the product because you're not adding any water to the product when you add those dried spices. And so you can reduce the amount of, like, ginger when it goes into that lemon ginger marmalade is fresh ginger. And I would not add any more than what the recipe says, but you could adjust it down if the ginger makes it spicy. And so if you don't like it as spicy, you can put less ginger in, but you can't put more ginger in because that would add more product that's got water in it. And that's the thing that you have to watch out for is your acidity. You don't want to mess up your percentage. You don't want to mess up the thing that's keeping your food safe. And so the dry spices is safe though. Anyway, did you have anything else for us, Barbara? No. Okay. Well, Colleen, it looks like you're up with your dessert sauce, your sunshine dessert sauce, which we could use some sunshine today. You're still on mute, Colleen.
Yep.
Okay.
Now I'm not. Now I'm talking. And I am going to be talking about the it's actually sunrise citrus dessert sauce. I keep calling it sunshine.
Okay.
But it is actually sunrise, and it's and can you see?
Yes,
My jar. It's very pretty, and it's really pretty simple to make. So let's start with the PowerPoint, and we'll go through it. There I am. Okay. There we go.
All right.
Did everybody see that?
Yes.
Oh.
Oh, it looks really, did you take that picture too?
I did not. I found that picture.
Oh, it looks really pretty.
And it looks really pretty, and it actually is what this looks like when it's done. So I thought that was I was very happy to find this picture when I was doing my PowerPoint. All right, so this is the Sunrise Citrus Dessert Sauce. And because I'm a master food preserver, the first thing we talk about is cleanliness, and produce needs to be washed. And even though we are going to peel our citrus today, we still need to wash it. When there's bacteria on the outside, even though you're taking the peel off, that bacteria gets on your hand or can be transferred into your produce. So what we need to do is wash each with water, rub the surface, rinse it, and blot it. We don't want to ever soak our produce. Water will penetrate the skins and it gets into our produce, and we don't want that to happen. Even if it you didn't run the risk of transferring bacteria, we don't want that extra water in our fruit.
Right. Colleen, you reminded me there when I was doing my master food preserver training 11 years ago. No, 8 or 9 years ago, whenever it was. One of the person who was doing this section of the training had a saying, and I thought it really brought it to mind. If you think about the surface of something like an orange and compare it in size to a bacteria, that surface of the orange is like the Grand Canyon,
Yes.
And so if you put water in there that can get to every corner of that Grand Canyon for that bacteria, you have just increased the amount of contamination possible.
Yes, very definitely. And, it's something I didn't think of before I became a master food preserver. But now that I have learned, and it makes a lot of sense, especially when you have something that's like a lemon or an orange or a cantaloupe. Think of how rough that skin is and how much bacteria can hide in there. So we want to make sure that our surfaces are clean. Here's a picture of the ingredients. There's the book that I got the recipe out of, and you don't have to worry if you don't have that book. We will be sending the recipes out to everybody, and a few more besides the ones we are doing today. It takes 1.25 cups of sugar, 1/3 cup of orange juice. I happen to have some oranges that I just picked off of a relative's tree, so I squeezed my own 1/4 cup of honey, 3 pieces of ginger root, each about 1/4. And like Linda was talking earlier, if you don't like it that spicy, you can reduce the amount of ginger that you put in there. 1 cinnamon stick, and I think I might add another cinnamon stick if I make this again. I prefer that cinnamon flavor, so I think I would add another one. And then it takes 9 cups of clementine orange segments, seeds and pith removed. My little mandarin oranges didn't have any seeds, and they didn't have a lot of pith. The pith is the white that's between the fruit and the rind. So you want to remove as much of that as possible. Here is my orange sections, my mandarin sections. A 3-pound bag was perfect, but you can't eat one. Not one, because that was my 9 cups. And I've made this a couple of times, and that was the same both times. 3 pounds is what you need. And you can see here on the picture, there's a little bit of pith and the rind. So if you're going to eat some, and let me tell you, I was really tempted by the 5-pound bag. All right, here I am heating up my jars. You don't need to sterilize your jars if you are going to be processing for 10 minutes or longer, but you want your jars to be hot, because when you are putting hot product into a cold jar, you run the risk of cracking that jar and the bottom could fall out or something. And it's just, after you've gone to that much work, you don't want to risk losing any of it, okay? So this is the sugar and the orange juice, the honey, the ginger root, and the cinnamon stick. This is the, and you put that in the pan. The first time I made this, I didn't realize that the orange sections would not cook down. So I thought let me go back here. Let me see here if I can go back. I don't do this enough to be good at it. So, well, I'll just, there we go. So I thought that, well, I would take the skins off of the sections. Well, when I looked at 9 cups of segments, I decided no. For one thing, some of them are pretty small, and for another, it would take me forever. And since the recipe didn't say to peel the skins off, I decided, well, I'm just going to let it go and I'll do something at the end. So here it is. My sauce came to a boil, and now I have added the mandarin segments, and I've stirred it up so you can see that nice cinnamon stick there. All right. And here, after we add the segments, we bring it to a gentle boil, and we boil only about 5 minutes. We're trying to heat through the little orange segments. After that's done, then we discard the cinnamon stick and the ginger root. So you need to make sure that you get all the ginger out. I noticed in one jar that I did yesterday, I missed a piece of the ginger root. However, luckily I was opening that jar so I could get that out, because I'm not sure how spicy that piece of ginger would make my jar if it sat on the counter or in my basement for 6 months. All right. And here I am. I'm removing the segments to put in the jar. And this is something that I thought was a little odd, but you remove the segments and fill the jars, and then you put the juice in over the segments. So you add the segments to a 1/4 inch mark on your jars, and then you add juice to cover the fruit to the 1/4 inch. So you only want a 1/4 inch head space, and that's the space between the top of the product and your lid. And you need to make sure when you are filling your jars that you fill them to the correct measurement, because that all has an effect on whether or not you get the correct vacuum seal in your jars. And that's what is going to, that's why we process. We want to vacuum seal that vegetable or fruit in the jars for protection, to make it safe. I have seen jars that one would have a 1/2 inch and one would be up to the top, and that's not good. You want to be consistent to what the recipe says when you fill your jars. Okay. Here I have a chopstick, and what I am doing is I am going around the jar, making sure that there's no air trapped in my jar, because with the segments like they are, there's plenty of room in there for air to get trapped, and you want to make sure you remove all of the air bubbles. And if you need to add a little more juice or whatever to bring that up to a 1/4 inch, then you just go ahead and do that. You want to make sure, like Barbara said, that you wipe the rims of the jars and then put the lids and the bands on. Then we process it, and this recipe calls for a 10-minute processing time. And these are my jars sitting in my steam canner. You've noticed probably that all of us have used a steam canner, and we are converts. If you're used to using a water bath canner, then you know how heavy those canners can be once you get your jars in there, and make sure that they're covered with at least 2 inches of water. And so you're carrying this big tub with lots of water. Water is heavy. If you're at my house and you're got to get the dog out of the way, and if there's people here, then you got to, there's always somebody in your way. The thing with the canner, the steam canner, that is wonderful is there's only a couple of inches of water in that steam canner, and you can use a steam canner on anything that you can use a water bath canner for, as long as it doesn't take more than 45 minutes to process. So that may be something.
And tell them the reason why for 45 minutes.
Well, yeah. After 45 minutes, you run the risk of running your canner dry. And I have done that.
Yeah, I did too. It wasn't good.
Yeah. And you notice the smell right away.
Yes, you do.
And
we don't recommend that.
We don't recommend it. So, but that to me, the weight of the canner to me was an immediate, oh yeah, I love this. All right, so here's the
Colleen. Before you go on, we had a couple of things in the chat, and
sure.
And I'm sure you're probably going to talk about it, but just to make sure everybody hears it, and I know Barbara repeated it. Okay, when you start counting the time with the steam canner, it has to do with the column of steam coming out of the vent hole in the back.
Yes.
And when it reaches the green zone, and it depends upon your altitude. And so if you buy one of these and you are at any altitude other than sea level, you will need to read your instructions that come with the canner and make sure that you have it in the correct zone for your altitude.
Right.
And the time changes depending upon altitude with the water bath canner, because water boils at different temperatures depending on what your altitude is. So when we say 10 minutes, we're talking about sea level, because all of us who live in Stockton are at sea level.
Right. And if you can see the temperature gauge, I have a pretty good picture of it. I worked really hard. I took a lot of pictures so I could get one that you could actually read. And you can see that there's different zones. And if you look to the right, you can see that the green is on zone 3 is different than it is in zone 2. So depending on what your altitude is, you have to wait until the red
indicator.
Indicator, there you go, is in the correct green area for your altitude. Because that's when you start counting your time.
Somebody asked, and I don't think I've ever seen anything. They asked if you have to check the temperature gauge annually. I have never heard of it needing to be. And I'll say it out loud and clear. Instapot is not a canner.
Instapot is not a canner. No.
In no way, no shape, no form is Instapot a canner. Do not think Instapot is a canner.
No, no. And the reason Instapot is not a canner is because the temperature fluctuates. Okay, it's not a consistent. I have an Instapot, I have a water bath, I have a steam, and I have a pressure canner. They are not interchangeable.
Right. And that Barbara just mentioned that, and it's really important to know that if you're going to do steam canning, you need to have a steam canner.
Right.
Not a big pot that you're trying to make into a steam canner.
Right.
Now, you can make a water bath canner out of anything that's big enough for you to be able to put your jar in and have it covered with water and not sitting on the bottom. But you cannot do that with a steam canner.
No.
Okay.
Now, I have seen a steam canner that did not have a gauge. In that case, you need to have a thermostat that will fit, or a thermometer that will fit in the hole so you can check your steam. I personally would not do that because I'm not comfortable doing that. And I don't know that, I don't know that much about it.
Colleen, University of California does not recommend
Oh,
canners that do not have the gauge. And of course, they have to have the steam holes. Some canners without the gauge have 2 steam holes, but they're not approved. You can use
okay.
them, they're not approved.
Okay.
So
Thank you, Barbara.
Thank you, Barbara. That's good to know. I would not even consider using one that didn't have a temperature gauge on it. I just would not feel comfortable. And I'm glad that we're not allowed to use those. Very good. Finishing up the sauce. After your sauce sits undisturbed for 12 to 24 hours, and Barbara had a good picture of her blood orange marmalade sitting on a towel. I always have a towel nearby to set my jars on. You don't want to set them on a cold counter because there again you risk breaking your jars, shocking them. After your jars have sat for 12 to 24 hours, check to make sure they have sealed. If you have any that haven't sealed, you could either reprocess them or just stick them in the refrigerator and use them within 2 or 3 weeks. You want to make sure that after they are sealed, that you take the rings off and wipe the jars down, and then label them. Now you can either label them with the date canned or the use by date. If I know I'm giving stuff away, I usually put a use by date on there because I don't want them to sit in their cupboard for years. not that they're going to go bad, but the quality will deteriorate.
And it does.
And it does. We have done tests to show that it does. The color, it can get a little mushy, the texture changes. It doesn't mean that it's bad. It just means that it's you've exceeded the use by date. Okay. Now here is a picture of my sunrise citrus dessert sauce. And I want to talk about 2 things here. One thing, this is a jar that I made in September. Okay, so it comes out chunky. Where it says chunky, that's how it will come out of the jar. And if you remember the picture at the beginning where it showed the chunks on the dessert, that's how it will come out. This one, you'll notice it's dark. That is because those dark segments were above the juice line. So that doesn't mean that they're not good. It just means that the color has changed. And I wanted to show you that that can happen. So you want to make sure that your segments are covered by the juice so you stay with that nice color. Now,
And the reason why it changes color, Colleen, is because that little bit of air that's above the product, between the product and the top of the bottom of the lid, has oxygen in it, and that surface has oxidized.
Right.
And that's one of the things that deteriorates food quality is oxidation happening. Yes. And so It just isn't pretty.
No, it isn't pretty, but it's not harmful either. But I wanted to show you that, and then the smooth is from the same jar. I just took the top part off for the chunky picture, and then with the smooth, which is the way I think of sauces in general, is that they're smooth. And I used, you could put that in your food processor or your blender. This I happen to use my stick blender on, but they're both out of the same jar. And you can use it either way if you want it chunky or if you want to smooth it out. Okay. And then here is the different things that are approved, different places where you can get approved food recipes and that sort of thing. And Barbara had that too, so that will be available as soon as the videos are sent to you. Okay.
Colleen,
Yes.
we talked, and so I would like you to tell people that next time, would you section the oranges?
You know, I really thought about that, but you know, mandarins are small, or the ones I had. I bought a bag of cuties. It doesn't matter what kind you get, but mine, you know, they're only, you know, they're tiny.
You're 2 inches.
Yes. So I would not. If I was doing an orange, I probably would cut those sections out so they wouldn't have that.
One of the people asked, would you consider blending the mixture before canning in the future?
I thought about that, and I wasn't sure about the thickness, but after I blended it, can you see this, Linda?
Yeah.
Okay. After I did this, I thought that it's not real thick like other things that we're not supposed to.
I think what we need to say as master food preservers, which might be different than what we might choose to do, but what
Right.
we need to say as master food preservers is this would be follow the recipe, because the one thing that you're doing when you blend it is you're changing the consistency.
Right.
And that's the reason we're taught, that's the reason why there is no recipe for canning pumpkin in a paste,
Right.
a pumpkin that's been blended, because there is no way in home food preservation to get consistent for the length of time you need temperature inside the jar of that thickness of a thing. And so when a recipe has been written for one kind of consistency and you change that, you are now messing with one of the things that makes it safe.
Yes. And that is exactly why I would not do that until afterwards.
Right. If it's probably safe, but we don't know that. And because we don't know that, we can't say, yes, you can do that. And so, I mean, we can say you can add dry spices because we know that doesn't mess with the safety, but we can't say do that and go ahead and process it for 10 minutes. It might be fine, but it might not be fine. And since we don't know that, we can't tell you that you can do that.
And it just takes a couple of minutes.
Yeah.
To do
and you
that.
might want it chunky. I mean, I really like that picture you had at the beginning of it poured over the cake or the ice cream or whatever.
Right.
It was,
Whatever. Yeah.
It was very pretty.
It was very pretty. And it's a beautiful color.
What's it taste like?
It's I can taste the ginger. I can't really taste the cinnamon, which is why I would consider putting another cinnamon stick in, because that's one of my favorite flavors. But it's very fresh.
Sunshine in a jar?
Yes, sunshine in a jar.
Okay, that's good.
And even though I did take my stick blender to it, it's still chunky. It's just smaller chunks.
Yeah.
But I think you could, I think you could use it over, of course, a cake or a pudding or even ice cream. I thought that it would be good over a chicken that you were roasting.
Mm-hmm. Well, the recipe from the book had suggested ice cream and angel food cake.
Right.
And I had thought that it would be a very pretty thing to drizzle across the top of an angel food cake
Right.
slice.
Yeah. And I think you could drizzle a little bit over some chicken, either after it was cooked or maybe if you were roasting one and you wanted to add some of that. But yeah, I think there's plenty of uses for it if you like that citrusy.
Somebody wanted to know if you could use the peel of the mandarin oranges to make marmalade.
I don't see why not, but you'd need
some more oranges.
You'd need some more oranges. Yeah.
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 Which would have their own peels.
Yes, exactly.
But it can go into your compost heap.
Yes,
or the other thing, yes, you could make candied peel. Somebody had that suggestion. And the other thing is, one of the things that I've taken to doing, because in the wintertime, we tend to have very dry houses. We don't have a lot of humidity in the wintertime. And so my new stove has a burner that is the absolute modern equivalent of put it on the back burner. And when it's on low, I can put a pot of water on that and it will take more than a day to turn into steam. And so what it does is it adds moisture to my house on a basis that's continuous.
Right.
And I throw things that are aromatic in it because then it makes my house smell good.
Yes.
So those peels could go in my humidity pot. And
I did want to comment about the question on testing the temperature gauge on a steamer. I've not read anything about that, and I've read a lot on using the steam canner. If that changes, then we'll certainly let everybody know. But right now, no, we don't have to have those. Not like a pressure canner where some of those need to be changed or tested and
right. Well, I think if you don't have anything more, we should ask if we have any more questions.
Yeah, that's.
And, I'm not seeing any more questions. The last one was, okay, what is the fix for the brown fruit at the top of the jar? Make sure that the fruit that at the top of the jar is covered by the liquid.
Yeah, I don't like that the recipe says fill to 1/4 inch with the segments and then fill to 1/4 inch with the juice. I think if the segments were down a little bit and covered completely by the juice, you wouldn't have that issue.
Yeah, but as Colleen said, it doesn't taste bad. It just doesn't look good.
Yeah.
And if you don't want it, you could pick it off and toss.
Yeah, there was just a couple of them.
Yeah.
But I did want to show that.
Okay, let's see. I don't see any more questions, at least not right now.
Yeah.
We managed to bring a little sunshine into at least in my part of Stockton, a gray and foggy day. So I'm glad to do it. Thank you everybody for joining us, and hopefully we'll see you next month.